let's go in chronological order with 8 Ball Posse, because there's a few different things that I was interested in discussing with you. So let's talk about the origins and who are some of the original members. How did the whole thing start? I know we talked about it being a breaking crew, that's Wild Style, but go a little bit deeper.
Right. So like the guys over in Wild Style crew with me were this guy Kenny Wayne, his sister Venus. They were both from LA. A lot of these people were all from different places. Like I might have been one. There's a handful of us that were actually from Norwalk, but a lot of them were like people that moved from Compton, from LA, from Bell Gardens, from wherever. You know what I mean? Like it was a mixed group of people. But my boy Kenny Wayne, which he's a black guy from he was from Watts, and his sister. They were both ended up being in LA Breakers later, but not at the time. But I met them in elementary school. Another guy named George Perez, Michael Sierra. So those are the original guys from Wild Style crew. But then eventually, like going to high school, we all got into hip hop. Had this boy Eminem, which he passed away, committed. A lot of these guys are dead too, like or have moved on somewhere that you don't even know where they're at. But this guy Eminem that ended up being a rapper, pretty big rapper in the city. A guy named J-Lo, he was a Samoan. That was one of my best friends then. Bobo and David, they were brothers from the One Ways. So we literally had guys from all over the place. I was probably the only one that grew up in the neighborhood. So, what was cool about having all these dudes is that we would run into other people and we always had a negotiator. You know what I mean? Like, oh, so-and-so's from, so-and-so grew up in the One Ways. Let him talk to them. You know what I mean? Like, or I grew up in neighborhood. So anything come up with neighborhood, I'd be like, hey, I fucking know, Silent from neighborhood and Little Joe from neighborhood. We're always constantly negotiating this shit. But yeah, the biggest thing was just accepting all different races. Like we were so mixed up that I loved it. Being a half breed, I never felt like super comfortable being a cholo. You know what I mean? Like growing up in neighborhood, I would see how like if you're a white cholo or half breed, you might have to put up some shit. You know what I mean? Like some extra bullshit. And I just was like more always. And plus, my mom kind of raised me more. My mom was a hippie, so she was more into like getting along with people. You know what I mean? So to me, I never felt comfortable just being around one group of people, Mexicans or just whites. I always felt great just being around all kinds of different people. And I thought that was part of hip hop too. You know what I mean? Yeah. And part of the whole thing is, when I would see those movies about New York, I would see like, a fucking Puerto Rican guy that looks white, like a black guy and then a half breed and some guy with red hair or something. I'd be like, oh, I love the way New York is, that like a white guy could talk like he's, like part of the crew and nobody gives a fuck, you know what I mean? Mm. So yeah, just, man, it was a great time. I ain't gonna lie, but
it sounds like a lot of fun, man. It sounds like okay, so half of the members were black. People thought that you guys were Crips affiliated.
Yeah, well, we got in the paper. They started saying that when we got on the gang, eventually got on the Norwalk Sheriff gang list, and from basically hanging out. And then some of the guys that we were hanging out with were committing crimes and shit. Like I had a couple of guys that used to rob people at Versatellers, which was something that people did back in the day. Wait for people to go to a Versateller and rob them at the Versateller. So a couple of those dudes did time. So we started getting on like the gang list. And then a lot of dudes were homeless or, like a lot of dudes with bad families, So like we would have essentially on Front Street, we had a guy from Norwalk named Chicho. His dad, Chaco, had a pad and he would let all the dudes just stay in the garage there. So that became our ditching party pad too, because that dad would let us party there. Every time we had ditching parties, we'd just pull up a car in the backyard and jump the sound system and have ditch. That was another thing we had, a bunch of ditching parties and shit. Which I don't know if people really remember those, but they were kind of a big deal. Especially with hip hop and shit. But yeah, like they thought we were like a Crip affiliated gang, but also because some of the black guys that were in there, they were from Crip neighborhoods, and they would say, even if they weren't really Crips, they would say, oh, I'm from Santana Block, or I'm from Beach Town Mafia, or whatever in neighborhood they grew up in. You know what I mean? So kind of had a criminal element that just got accentuated over time. And then accepting other guys too. We started eventually just jumping guys in, at Norwalk Park, which once you start jumping people in, pretty much a gang. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you cease to be like a party group anymore. Before that it was like, hey, we just meet people that were cool, or, we had our core group of dudes, and then we were going outside the city, Whittier, Norwalk, Santa Fe, and just meeting other people. And they said, oh, this guy's cool, and, bring him in. He's, does graffiti, he's into this or that. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much, yeah. Just, we sometimes we would call ourselves Minorities United. Okay. Yeah, and we would have. I mean, I remember some guys that I even thought were Mexican. They would end up being like Argentinian, or a couple of dudes I knew oh no, I'm really Argentinian or something. I'm El Salvadorian and shit. It's like, oh fuck, I never knew, because back then too, a lot of people that were Hispanic that weren't Mexican, they might be Latin American. They would just say they were Mexican because they didn't want no problems. You know what I mean? I don't know if you ever encountered that, but that was pretty common back then for like an El Salvadorian or Nicaraguan or whoever's like, just, yeah, I'm Mexican. Like, you know, it was just kind of easy, you know?
Yeah, I've heard that several times from growing up in LA. So yeah, I definitely get that.
Well, that, you know, NORWALK was fucking highly racist too. That's another thing. I mean, the cholos there were fucking, I mean, pretty much racist towards blacks, which is, but you know, racist towards blacks unless you're in their gang, you know. Really racist towards Mexicans from Mexico, which I'm not sure if that's the same anymore. And also white people, but white people are like kind of last on the list because they're just, you know, white people are there. So they're like, I think more the thing is being a half breed. If they called you white boy back then, that meant you're like weak. You know what I mean? Like, that's basically calling you a pussy, you know? So yeah, it was, I would say it was pretty highly racist back then too, but everybody kind of just knew how it is, you know what I mean? And, hey, we could all be cool on the street, but like, the main thing is that if we ever get locked up, you know, that's another thing too. Eventually I went to LA County Jail, and there we could never mention, everybody knew you can't mention you're from Able Posse. It's not like, because it's a mixed group of people. Like, so we all kind of knew, like, well, I would never say anything to anybody about any of that shit. You know, it's kind of something. So yeah, as a gang, that could never last, you know, but, yeah, I mean, the party group stuff, dude, which was really cool back then, was, we throw these parties, but, we cruise Whittier Boulevard, you know, like, and then, I don't know how much the Boulevard, if anybody ever cruises the Boulevard. I don't know when it eventually got shut down.
Yeah, like they just reopened it. They shut down cruising for years, decades, and there were a lot of groups out there that wanted to bring it back. So as of just about a year ago, you could officially cruise Whittier Boulevard again.
Wow, yeah, because they were, at the time, they were allowing us to do it, but then there started being all these stipulations and all this other shit. You know, of course, a lot of shit happens. You know, we got a bunch of fights on the Boulevard and stuff. But eventually people would go to Leg Lake, you know, like a parking lot for Leg Lake.
I could throw a rock and hit Leg Lake right now. I live that close to
Oh, really? Hell yeah. I used to fish there with my dad, too, which is crazy that we ended up in this parking lot one time, and they're like, oh, we're at Leg Lake. And I was like, I used to fish there with my fucking dad, you know. And then Turbo Canyon, that was another one everybody goes to Turbo Canyon. But that shit got crazy, too. Like, one time we got into it with some people up there, and, like, a couple people got shanked and fucking died, and, like, at the end of that era, it just was getting fucking fucked up really bad, you know what I mean? But yeah, doing that, the backyard parties, and then also getting hotels. That was another thing we did, get hotels in North, Anchor Inn, Comfort Inn. There were certain ones we would get that would just let you get them and party at them. They wouldn't even say shit, you know, like you could party all night, have fun. And yeah, I mean, I think by the end of that era, all that shit was like coming to an end.